Okay, so hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Fall Global. This is where we connect with global first entrepreneurs and remote work experts from all around the world to share their experiences. Our guest today is Philippe Noël, co founder and CEO at ParadeDB. Philippe, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, welcome to the podcast, and it's great to have you here. You are your second time founder. You co-founded Whist first, right? And now you're ParadeDB, which is Elasticsearch alternative built on Postgres, right? So your current company is backed by YCombinator, and previously you raised 3 mil for your previous startup, which is quite an achievement, in fact. So, is there anything I missed or anything you would like to add to this intro?
No, that sounds great. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Then let's start with your previous startup, right? So, Whist, right? A browser for secure remote work. So it seems like it was a pretty interesting concept, and it was just the right time to launch it, which was like 2018, correct?
2020.
Oh, 2020. Okay. Still, so you raised then 3 mil, and you've been working on it for about 3 years or so. So is it still operational?
It's not operational. We closed the company down at the end of
No.
2022.
Oh, okay. Got it. And just curious, because I'm really interested in that concept. To like just maybe a few words. What were some of the biggest like opportunities and challenges you faced with that previous startup?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I
Okay.
wrote a long postmortem online that people can read if they find my Twitter or LinkedIn. That goes into the details if anyone's curious.
Okay.
It's been read over 50,000 times by now. So, but anyways, to answer your question directly, we wanted to help animators work remotely. So it was like videographers, animators. Basically, we wanted to help them run creative software like Adobe and so on from any device. That was how we started. Over time, our product morphed into being a browser because we saw most of our users were actually interested in making their browser faster, and we're doing all of their work through browsers. And Adobe was starting to release Adobe Photoshop Web, and we saw the shift to browsers. I don't think it has fully happened yet for animation, but that's what we saw. And then as we released that product, we saw a lot of challenges. The biggest one really is, personal devices became faster, and there was a better way to do security for browsers without needing this sort of remote browser setup. You could do it locally on the user device, and there's a couple of companies that came out that were doing this. The biggest one is called Island, and eventually we realized our solution was just not the most optimal, right? And we decided to
Got
pack
it.
shop and focus on something else.
Got it. Got it. Why I asked about like your previous startup, because what I found out is that you had a pretty international global team at Whist, right? From
We
your
did, yeah.
LinkedIn, it was like you hired around 30 people, I guess, like from different countries, like the US, Brazil, the UK, Hungary, Eastern Europe. Maybe I missed a few countries. So, what was your motivation to build a global first company back then? And what was your motivation to hire from all those countries?
We just wanted to get the best people, right? And what we were doing was quite niche. We were working on, on video streaming. We needed to do a lot of stuff around the graphics cards as well, which the expertise for video encoding is a bit distributed. So our top video streaming engineer ended up being based in India. We had another one based in the UK. We had one based in France. We just wanted to get the best people, and we figured we'd get the best people wherever they live, right? Talent is not concentrated, right? There's extremely smart people all over the world.
Correct.
Why should we limit ourselves to a smaller pool?
That's so true. And what worked well in your international hiring strategy, and maybe what didn't work as you expected? Because it was your first startup, first experience hiring like internationally. Maybe you can share that experience with our audience.
Yeah, I think for the most part we got it to work pretty well by the end of it. The hardest thing I would say is culture, right? Making people feel like they're part of the same team. So we did a lot around that. Like we made sure to do our team meetings at times that could accommodate everyone. So fortunately, we had kind of middle of the day team meetings in the East Coast here in the US, so that it would be, not super late. Like it would be kind of evening for people in India, and it would be middle of the day for people in Europe, and here a little bit earlier. We really wanted to have everyone on the same meetings as much as possible. That took some trial and error, but it worked pretty well. We also did a lot of team bonding events. It helped that we were running that company for the majority of it during COVID. So everything was remote by default, and there was kind of a willingness to make it work remote. That was pretty present at the time just because we had to. But we did team bonding events every week, try to make sure people would get along well. Yeah, for the most part, I think it actually worked reasonably well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And moving to your current venture, which is ParadeDB, your current venture is quite different, I guess, from your previous, like a startup, from the business perspective, from the business idea, right? So how did you come up with the idea of ParadeDB? What was the trigger that made you move this direction?
Yeah, I mean, they're completely different companies, right? So we had about a 6 months period between the two of them. So it wasn't really a direct transition. In the period between the two, me and my co-founder, we were exploring the idea of doing something different, and we wanted to kind of learn more about other areas of work because we didn't really want to work on browsers anymore. And as we did, we started doing some contracting with a bunch of companies, mostly in Europe at the time, because I was based there. And we found a lot of people that were using both Postgres and Elasticsearch together, and they were facing a lot of issues. We learned more about the space and realized we thought we could actually solve that problem by improving Postgres so it could offer the same capabilities. And that's what kind of got us interested. And we joined YCombinator and pursued that idea. And now things are going pretty nicely for it. So it's been
Awesome.
good.
Awesome. Can you maybe share some numbers that you're comfortable with at this point? Maybe, yeah, I understand that it's too early, but still, maybe revenue, clients, recent funding rounds, or maybe it's the market size, like how big is it, and who's your target audience?
Yeah, things are good. Our database got deployed about 60,000 times by now. We raised a couple of millions funding round. We started monetizing recently, and we're actually kicking off the bigger monetization in July. In July, we'll be releasing our main enterprise product. We started working with a couple of pretty large enterprises, 2 Fortune 500, which are using our product internally. Fortunately, these big companies, they have engineers that do a lot of work to help bring the product into their infrastructure. Now we're building the capabilities to make that really easy for anyone, even smaller companies, so we can start monetizing faster. So that's going to be happening, but it's things are good. Or in the open source, I think we're one of the faster growing Postgres companies, which has been exciting.
Okay, that sounds good. But like. Looking back, I guess it's something that early stage founders would love to hear. Identifying like a product market fit is crucial for any startup. So how did you identify and validate your product market fit for ParadeDB?
That's a good question. I would say I don't think we have product market fit yet. I think we're starting to feel it, but we try to be very diligent about, assuming, like being very harsh on ourselves, right? I don't think we have full product market fit yet, but we're starting to feel it. What I heard, at least from YC, is like when you have product market fit, when things are breaking under positive usage, like you have like too many users, so things are starting to go wrong, right? Or like, too much interest and things like that.
Okay.
I would say we have project market fit, where like a lot of people in the open source really like our company and our product. We've mostly been just trying to talk to as many people that will talk to us, or as many users. And it went from people being like, this is an interesting product, to, wow, I love this, to like, wow, I'm so excited about where this is going. And those kind of, the feedback kind of piles on, and it gives us confidence in our direction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sounds good. You mentioned that you acquired a number of large clients at this point, but can you tell us about your very first client for ParadeDB? how did you land them, and what was that experience like?
Well, the very first was a fellow startup in the YC batch that we were a part of last summer. I think that's a bit of a common story among YC
Yeah.
companies. So I don't know if I have something super new to share. The first big client that we had, fortunately, was from inbound. So we basically just focus on our software is open source, and so people can go and they can see it. We also write blog posts whenever we make major announcements, and they tend to do pretty well on social medias and on Hacker News and so on. And so engineers at that company had found out about our work, and reached out to express interest in using it.
Awesome. So it's your second startup, right? So with your new venture, what mistakes are you trying to avoid now that you made back then?
There are so many mistakes that we're trying to avoid now. We made so many back then.
Maybe
The biggest
top
one,
three. Yeah.
yeah, top three. The biggest one, we didn't talk to enough customers in the first company. In this company, I try to talk to a customer every single day.
Okay.
It does not matter what else is going on that day. Every single day, I try to talk to a customer, ideally on a Zoom call, but sometimes it's just via email or LinkedIn or something like that. You can never have too much feedback, is what I've learned. But you very much can have not enough feedback. That's very common. The second one is hiring too many people. As you said, the first company, we hired 30 people in total. That was too many. That was too many for the stage of our company. Not too many in general, but for how far along we were as a business, it was too many. This company, we're only 4 people right now, and I would say we're a further along business than we were in my previous one. So we try to have very high bar and try to do a lot with little. That's the second biggest one. And I think the third one is we're trying to be more focused. Our first company, we did many things and not all of them well, right? You can only do so many things well. This time we're trying to do very few things and just do them like the best anyone has ever done them. Because typically customers will pick you if you're the best solution for a small problem, much more likely than if you're a mediumly good solution for a big problem.
And speaking about the team, you mentioned that at this point you have 4 team members, right? So
that's right, yeah, including myself.
Okay. So, and building on that, how are you constructing your current team at ParadeDB? As a second-time founder, what priorities do you have in mind? Are you focusing on the cost of hiring, speed, return on investment, or something else?
Yeah, I mean, all of these are factors, right? The main thing that I'm focusing on is people that are very flexible, that are very, very good, and that are comfortable with the stage of the company. So what I mean by that is like we hired, it's me, my co-founder, and 2 of our engineers. Both of them, fortunately, are people we had worked together before from my previous startup. So we knew them well already, and we knew what they were capable of. But also, we were pre-revenue when we hired them. We made that very clear, right? We were like searching to build the right product and get it to market. There's still questions that are not answered yet. And it's important for us that we have people that are comfortable with this. There's people who work very well under the uncertainty and some that prefer to work under more direction. And we were just not at that stage. And so we wanted people that would understand that and would sort of help find the answers. So we've prioritized, flexibility, trust, and people that are like very, very good. I prefer to pay fewer really good people than to pay less, not as good people, but have many of them.
Mm-hmm. But are you still comfortable with this global first approach or remote first approach?
Yeah, I would say I am. We have one. So out of the 4 of us, there's 3 that are in New York, and there's 1 that's in LA. So we're not as remote and as global as we used to be at the previous company. But I do think it's very possible that we become as we hire more people. We just haven't scaled as much yet. I will say I have learned to have a bit of a preference for in-person. I do think it makes certain things easier, but I still believe that talent is, uniformly distributed and there's amazing people everywhere, and we'll love to hire the right people wherever they are.
Okay, I love that. So you are backed by YCombinator. Specifically, you're in this S23 cohort, which seems like one of the strongest one lately. So I work with a number of founders there, and it seems like, really an incredible group.
There's good
So,
people in it.
yeah, 100%. And for those founders looking to get into this legendary YCombinator, what maybe 3 key pieces of advice would you give them?
I only have one, honestly. Like the only piece of advice I have is just really understand your customers.
Okay.
Like I think people, some people say you need to have X amount of revenue, X amount of experience, X amount of funding before you do YC or things like that. In my experience, it's not really been true. Like there's people from all walks of life and all stages of companies that join YC. Some are like worked in their company for a long time, and some like us were just starting. But the one thing that YC emphasize on is just what do you understand about your customers or your market that other people don't understand, right? That's kind of the thing that every founder is searching for. If you know something other people don't, or you just understand it better, then if you apply that, you will deliver a better solution, right? And everything else kind of falls from it. Yeah. So whatever that may be, like, and if you have revenue, then that's a proof that you understand something pretty well, right? But just if you have a lot of user interviews and you've extracted some good insights, that's worth a lot. So I think just talk to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
Like forget the coding.
Yeah, I love that. And generally speaking, you mentioned that you raised a couple mil for this existing startup that you're currently working on. So generally speaking, fundraising in 2024 has been quite, I guess, different from previous years, right? So what has changed, and what advice would you give to founders looking to raise funds in the current environment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've changed as well, between the two times that I've raised. So that's also tempting my experience. But I do think my advice is somewhat similar. Like you just want to understand have an insight, right? Have an insight that others don't have. Like if you have that, fundraising becomes game of execution, like getting introduction. Obviously, if you can get introduction to the right VCs, it helps a lot. It's better than cold outreach. We were fortunate that we knew a lot of VCs from our first company, but really like most of the people that backed us this time around, some we knew, but many of them, they just thought what we were doing was cool and they reached back out, right? So I think a lot of people start a company and they seek to fundraise, but if you just seek to build the best, experience for your customers, the fundraising will happen by itself, and the VCs, they will notice and they will reach out, and that's the best way to fundraise. Just focus on the customers. The VCs, if you focus on your customers and you do well, the VCs come.
Awesome. And you mentioned this. What I really liked, you told me that you changed as well. So, as a second time founder, could you please maybe name again 3 things you wish you had known with your first startup that you know now?
Yeah, that's a good question. In our first startup, we tried to run a very tight fundraising process. You mean fundraising specifically, right?
Yeah,
in general?
Maybe fundraising is the core, but maybe if you can share something else, it will be nice as well.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one I would say is, actually, let me go back to that. The biggest one I would say is just humility, right? In our first company, we thought we knew what we were doing, and we were like telling the world what we were doing, rather than go listen to the world and decide what to do as a result of what we hear, right? So instead of talking to users and understanding them, we would talk to users and tell them what we had and get them, tell them to use it, but it wasn't exactly the right solution. It's kind of the same thing we did with investors as well, where we were like, we have built this amazing product, so we think, like, you must like it as well because we've poured our hearts into it. But there were a lot of things that were wrong about our product, and investors would tell us, and we kind of refused to listen, right? Yeah. And so we were a little bit stubborn in that way because we had the wrong perspective. Nowadays, the approach we take is, go out, listen to what people have to say. When I tell them what we do, there's a lot of things that they really like about what we do, and they, react very positively. And there's some things that sometimes I can tell they're, they're not convinced, right? And when investors are not convinced, well, they spend all their time talking to people and trying to understand your market. And so maybe there's something that they understand that I don't, right? And I try to extract insights from them and be very humble about what we know and don't know. That's the biggest shift I think we've made for building the company. And it might sound like a small thing, but it compounds in a lot of ways. And it's applied a lot to investing as well. Another one investing related is, we used to get advice to run a very tight process, like pack all the VC meetings in the same 2-3 days, right? Pitch them back to back and make sure that they have this like feeling of urgency, right? And like if they don't make an offer, someone else will and they'll lose out and so on. What I've learned is it's a lot better to build a relationship with investors. They get to know you, they get to know how you work. And, if they invest in you, you'll be working together for many, many years. Most VCs don't like being pushed around, and I don't think it actually leads to significantly better terms for founders either. So now I talk to VCs I like, just a select few, like pretty regularly, every few months, right? Just stay in touch, and it makes raising the rounds a lot easier. Like there's a lot of VCs that knew us from our previous company that wanted to back us again, and instead of having a sense of urgency where we're like, you need to give us money now, or people are like, they even come and they offer it, right? They're like, Phil, like we see the progress has been really amazing. Like we really like you guys. We're excited. We've been waiting to partner up for a while. Like, can we make something happen? So I think that's been, it's at the end of the day, it's all a people business, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And probably my last question. So being a founder often requires some personal sacrifices, right? So what are some personal sacrifices you've had to make to ensure the success of your startups, and how do you manage this work-life balance? I guess that's part of the same question.
Yeah, that's a good question. The two biggest personal sacrifice I will say are like the biggest sacrifice I would say is comfort, right? The truth is, if I took a job at a company, I would be earning a bigger salary than the one I'm earning today, right? And so that could come with more quality of life in certain respects.
Yeah.
That's definitely a sacrifice that I've made, and I feel comfortable with. We're fortunate now that things are going well, so we do earn a comfortable wage, but I know it could be much higher. That's one. I think the other one is just stress. And the biggest cost that it has had on my life is sometimes like, I need to remind myself to exercise and sleep well and eat well and so on, like all the things that people might not do when they're stressed, right?
Right.
Someday when you're doing a startup, you feel like everything is going great and like you're gonna, crush it. And sometimes you're like, oof, like something bad happens and you feel like everything is falling apart, right? Fortunately nowadays we have fewer of those moments, but they were certainly there before, and there'll probably be more in the future. So that's been another important one. But for the most part, things are pretty good, I would say. And
Awesome.
when we met Paul Graham, the founder of YC, I was fortunate to meet him, and he invested in us. He told me and my co-founder to focus on building a company that we will still be happy working at in a few years, right?
Okay.
Because it's a marathon, not a sprint. And if you work 90 hours a week and you're like really unhealthy, right, and you're really stressed out of your mind all the time, then in 6 months you won't be happy, or in a year you won't be happy. And the big companies, they're built over 5-10 years. So you need to still, in 5 years, 7, 8 years, be excited to get up and work in the morning. And that comes with building, in a sustainable way. So I try to, I try to work less than I used to, and things like that, just to make sure it's sustainable.
Yeah, that's a very good advice. Okay, I guess we're good. Thanks a lot for sharing your story, your insights, how you moved from your first startup to starting ParadeDB, your strategies for building like a teams. Good luck with your new venture with ParadeDB, and yeah, we're excited to see where you take it next. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and good luck to you too with everything.